There's a specific kind of pain that doesn't scream, it doesn't slam doors or raise its voice. It just stops talking. If you've ever watched someone go completely silent after being hurt, not sulking, not performing anger, just quiet, you've witnessed one of the most misunderstood responses in human behavior. People assume silence means someone doesn't care. In reality, it usually means the opposite. It means they cared so much that speaking became dangerous. Let's talk about why. The nervous system doesn't lie. When most people picture a stress response, they think of fight or flight. But there's a third response that gets far less attention: freeze. And going quiet is often freeze in disguise. When a person is hurt, deeply, unexpectedly, or repeatedly, their nervous system runs a split-second calculation. Is it safe to speak? Will this be heard, or will it make things worse? For some people, past experience has already answered that question. And the answer was, it makes things worse. So, the body does what it learned to do. It shuts the mouth before the mind even finishes the sentence. This isn't a choice made at a desk with a pros and cons list. It's a reflex, wired in by repetition, often from years before the person you're watching go quiet ever met you. Silence is often a learned survival skill. Think about a child who grows up in a home where expressing hurt led to punishment, mockery, or being told they were too sensitive. That child learns fast that emotional expression is a liability, not because they're weak, because they're paying attention. Kids are excellent pattern detectors. If crying gets you yelled at, you stop crying where people can see it. Fast forward 20 years. That same person is now an adult in a relationship, a friendship, a workplace. Someone says something careless. It lands like a blow, and the adult version of that child does exactly what kept them safe back then. They go still. They go quiet, not out of manipulation, out of muscle memory. This is why silence, in a lot of people, isn't cold. It's protective. It's the emotional equivalent of pulling your hand back from a stove you've been burned on before. The difference between silence and the silent treatment. It's worth drawing a hard line here, because these two things get confused constantly. The silent treatment is a strategy. It's often, though not always consciously, used to punish, to gain control, or to force the other person to chase, apologize, or fix things. It has an audience in mind. It's performed at someone. Going quiet from hurt is different. It's not performed for anyone. It's what happens when a person genuinely doesn't have access to words yet. There's no strategy behind it, no leverage being pulled. It's closer to a system overload than a tactic. If you ask someone in this state, "Why won't you just talk to me?" and they look almost pained by the question, that's usually your answer. They're not withholding. They're overwhelmed. Mixing these two up is one of the most common relationship misreadings there is. One is a bid for power. The other is a nervous system doing damage control. Why words disappear. Exactly when they're needed most. Here's something counterintuitive. The more hurt a person feels, the less available their language often becomes. That seems backwards. Shouldn't bigger pain produce bigger explanations? Not according to how emotion actually moves through the brain. Intense emotional pain activates deep, primitive parts of the brain. The same regions involved in basic survival responses. Meanwhile, the part of the brain responsible for organizing thoughts into coherent sentences sits in the prefrontal cortex, a much newer, more easily disrupted region. Under high emotional load, that region can quite literally go offline in relative terms. Access to it narrows. This is why someone might be able to calmly explain what upset them a day later, but in the moment it happened, all they could manage was silence or a flat "I'm fine." It's not that they didn't want to explain, it's that the explaining machinery was temporarily unreachable. Quiet people often feel the most, not the least. There's a persistent myth that quiet equals unaffected, that if someone truly cared, they'd fight for the conversation, chase clarity, demand to be heard. But some of the most emotionally attuned people are also the ones most likely to withdraw when hurt, precisely because they feel things at a volume that's hard to regulate. Speaking in that state feels risky, like it might come out too big, too raw, too honest. So they wait. They retreat inward, not because the feeling is small, but because it's enormous and unfiled. Ironically, the people around them often do the opposite of what would help. They seek quiet and assume disinterest, so they pull away too, or get frustrated and push harder for answers. Both responses tend to confirm the original fear. See, speaking up isn't safe. And the cycle deepens. Attachment style plays a quiet role. Here, too, people with what's called an avoidant attachment style often process hurt through withdrawal by default. Not because they're incapable of intimacy, but because closeness itself was, at some point, associated with disappointment or loss of self. Going quiet becomes a way of self-soothing without relying on anyone else, because relying on others didn't historically go well. On the other hand, someone with an anxious attachment style might go quiet for a different reason entirely. Fear that saying the wrong thing will cause the relationship to end. Their silence isn't detachment, it's hypervigilance. They're not distant, they're bracing. Same behavior, two completely different internal experiences, which is exactly why silence is such a poor stand-in for someone's actual emotional state. It tells you almost nothing on its own. Context is everything. What's actually happening behind a quiet face? If you could see inside the mind of someone who's gone quiet after being hurt, it often doesn't look like emptiness. It looks like noise, a replay loop of what was said, searched for hidden meaning, a rehearsal of responses that get discarded before they're spoken, because none of them feel safe or accurate enough. A running estimate of how the other person might react to each possible version of the truth. The stillness on the outside is doing a lot of load-bearing work for a very active interior. This is part of why silence can be exhausting in a way that arguing rarely is. Arguing releases something, silence contains it. Why this matters. Understanding this isn't just an interesting psychological footnote. It changes how you respond to the quiet people in your life. If someone you care about goes silent after being hurt, the instinct to demand an immediate explanation to a system that's already overloaded. What tends to work better is signaling safety without demanding output, letting them know you're not going anywhere, and that there's no deadline on when they need to have the right words. And if you're the one who goes quiet, it's worth knowing this isn't a character flaw. It's a strategy your mind built, probably a long time ago, because it worked when you needed it most. The goal isn't to shame that instinct out of existence. It's to slowly teach your system that not every room is the room where speaking up went wrong. Silence in this context was never really about the other person. It was always about safety. Once you see it that way, it stops looking like coldness and starts looking like a very old, very tired form of finally asking for a little patience.